I'm Keith. I like to be called Keith, and I love questions. I'm going to tell you a little bit about a sperm whale skeletal display we created for the North Carolina Maritime Museum. Actually, while we have this up here, I want to point out a few things. We're going to talk about the stranding of this live sperm whale that died on the beach. And then this is a final display, but I want to point out two things that you can see pretty well here. One is the head. I cannot think, of a skull that does such a poor job informing us of what the live animal looks like than a sperm whale. Most of this head is non-skeletal. It's oil, soft tissue, air, and blood plumbing. The other thing I want to point out is a unusual thing about deep divers like sperm whales and also beaked whales. They lack upper jaw teeth. They only have teeth in the lower jaw. That's typical, that's normal, that's predictable. And if your phone goes off, I'm going to embarrass you. It's a good time to silence your ringers. A shout out to our marine mammal stranding network. Too much information here, but I just want to introduce you that it exists. Every coastal state has a marine mammal stranding network. We're just North Carolina's. So as recently as last Thursday, we get the calls of dead, dying, entangled marine mammals. And it's critical for the story I'm about to tell you. And the map shows you the three capes that are characteristic of North Carolina. And we are right here at Fort Macon. And in the next 40, 45 minutes or so, I'm going to address all these topics related to this one stranding. A bit about whales. This poster represents all the known species of whales, dolphins, and porpoises on Earth, known to science as of about 10 years ago when it was printed. There have been some changes. But in this poster, all the baleen whales are facing away from me, the ones that lack teeth. And the top left picture shows a humpback whale feeding, and you see the baleen in the upper jaw. They strain their food. They lack teeth. And then facing me are the toothed whales. And the biggest toothed whale by far is a sperm whale. For the online audience, I'm going to get to this poster in my slide, I think, next. But I just wanted to show you an example of toothed whales. Technically, a bottlenose dolphin, which is shown on the lower right, is a small toothed whale, and this one is displaying its toothy grin. And this is the poster. But all I'm going to talk about today is the sperm whale. It's the largest of the toothed whales, and that's it. Sperm whales, very widely distributed from the ice to the ice, through the tropics. Most of what we know from studies have indicated that females and young are restricted to the tropical and temperate waters between 40 degrees north, 40 degrees south. There are some exceptions that have been notable, but in general, that's the case. And it's only the males that tend to venture further toward the poles in each hemisphere. That star shows us where we are here. So we are within the range of females, young, and males. And we do see both here, stranded, but also offshore. Just a few details about them. They have a very low reproductive rate. Produce a calf one every 5 to 14 years, it says. Long gestation period, 15 to 16 months. Calf gets weaned between 2 and 13 years. And longevity, someone asked me, how long do they live? And I really didn't know. So I went to this book by Hal Whitehead called Sperm Whales. He's like the world's authority on sperm whales. And he said there was 60 to 70 years, but that's based on very little science. We just don't know what how long they could live. And this picture shows a mom with presumably her newborn baby. So the mom's head is about here, and that's mom's dorsal fin. And the little bitty newborn, that's the blowhole, the front of the head, the bitty newborn dorsal fin's about there. And we just stayed long enough to take this picture. And we didn't want to disturb them, but it was fascinating to be able to see a mom and her newborn. And during that sighting, there were a bunch of moms and calves. And the fisherman on the boat I was working on said, "Oh, let's catch some squid." And I said, what makes you think of that? They said, well, wherever there's a nursery group of sperm whales, there's going to be squid. The pregnant or lactating moms are the hungriest sperm whales out there. So anyway, the fishermen who are shown back there caught a bunch of squid, and this is an example of that, one of them. We would call that a large squid. It's probably small for a sperm whale. But it was interesting to me to see that it was very predictable that large squid could be caught in the vicinity of sperm whales. This picture was off the Galapagos, Eastern Pacific. The hard part in a squid is the beak. And this is the beak from that squid. And this is how we can tell if the whale's been feeding, but also some people can actually identify the species of squid by the beak. And in this little jar, when the lights come on, you're welcome to see it. These are some of the squid beaks from the stomach of the whale that's on display at the Maritime Museum. How are we doing? I want to pause for a sec to see if there are any questions or make sure everyone can hear me okay. Yeah?
Take the squid in out. It's swallowed and chewed up. How do they actually do it?
I don't know. This is a fascinating thing. This has never been observed. Not in film. Just recently something was posted. I don't even know if it's true. It's the first time a squid had ever been seen in a sperm whale mouth. Generally, they feed deep. They chew. We don't know if they chew. They don't have teeth in the upper jaw. They may use suction. We just don't know. It's a great question. It's amazing how little we know.
I think the humpback, they can only take in like this big, right?
I've heard that. Just wanted to depict a few whaling scenes. Of course, photography didn't exist for most of this, but this shows these were the most sought after species, sperm whales, for the oil in their heads primarily, in the global whaling industry. And in the start, it was a large sailing ship that would have smaller boats on board, and those boats would be launched in order to harpoon and then kill a sperm whale, and then mainly harvest the oil. Another whaling scene depicted in art. And this represents about 200 years of global sperm whale catches. Anyone who studies this probably agrees it's an underestimate. But in the early days, late 1700s and then the 1800s, arguably that could have been a sustainable catch for humans killing sperm whales. And when oil was discovered in Pennsylvania, that took a lot of demand off outfitting ships to go out and get oil from sperm whales. Just easier to dig a well. And then the ships developed exploding harpoons and factory ships that could process whales offshore rather than drag the carcass ashore to process it there. And multi-year voyages, as long as 5-year voyages, and the sperm whale kills just skyrocketed. They became threatened or extinct in most of their range. And then the Endangered Species Act in this country, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and the International Ban on Whaling ended large-scale sperm whale hunting in the 60s and 70s to where I don't know where they're hunted today, if anywhere. Certainly not in this country. I got this from the New Bedford Whaling Museum, and it just depicts sperm whale kills. It's not important that you see the colors or the hollow or the filled circles, as it is that you just see that off of North Carolina was a whaling destination. Not so much off Cape Cod or the Gulf, but off of North Carolina. And then that was an easy place to go for New Englanders who developed the whaling industry, and Europeans as well. but mainly New Englanders. And then they became nearly extinct, economically extinct in North Carolina, and the whalers went much further into the Southern Ocean, into the Pacific Ocean to find sperm whales. They have the biggest nose on Earth, and we believe that they cannot smell. But this is the head of a sperm whale. This shows the reservoir of oil that the whalers were after, that I think people agree one of its primary purposes is modulating sound. We think its world is sound, much like ours is vision. And to a lesser degree, this area, the whalers would call junk, but it had a lot of tissue and some oil in it. But this is why they were killed, primarily for the oil in their heads. And this is a sample of the oil from the sperm whale at the Maritime Museum. And when the lights come on, you're welcome to look at it, smell it. If you don't mind the smell, you can touch it. Your grandparents knew this smell. This was the smell of safety, security, money. This is what was depended on. Oh, and they have the biggest brain on Earth. They're not the biggest whale, but they have the biggest brain. And we're not hunting them, but we are managing to still kill them. Entanglement is one threat to the species. Ooh, ingestion of fishing gear and plastic from this whale represents another threat to the species. And ship strikes. That's a propeller strike, propeller strike, propeller strike. This whale is facing that way, and that's its dorsal fin. There are threats, and they aren't whalers' harpoons anymore. And I wanted to introduce you to this case of a stranding in North Carolina. This one came ashore in Avon, North Carolina, just north of Buxton. A young female came ashore alive. She died on the beach, and typical of sperm whales, teeth only in the lower jaw, and she was really skinny. The next slide is going to reveal to you what was discovered in her digestive system. And this is it. And you recognize some of this stuff. There's a line of different length and diameter, plastic grocery bag. Looks like there's a balloon and some plastic film in here. Plastic film, plastic bag, an air bladder of some sort from maybe a sleeping pad, I don't know. This is alarming to me. I don't want to lead you to believe this is typical. This is the most extreme case that I'm aware of in North Carolina. But the oh wow to me is we are finding more plastic more of the time in deep divers than we are in shallow divers. And we don't understand why. Shallow divers, like bottlenose dolphins, rarely do we find plastic, and when the veterinarians do, they don't think it typically doesn't contribute to the death of it, but it's the deep divers where this is more likely to happen. And I just want to introduce you to that. Okay, bring it on home. This is Cape Hatteras, Cape Lookout, and right in that area, I'm going to blow up. So just to orient you, we're looking northish, the east end of Shackleford Banks, the west end of Harker's Island, and this is the tip of Cape Lookout, and the arrow is pointing to where on a cold January day, we got a phone call reporting a live sperm whale on the beach at Cape Lookout. By the time we got there, it had died. It was still warm, they're mammals, warm-blooded, but it was very fresh dead, and this is it. Just another picture of it. Another picture, and this one shows something unique about sperm whales. They're the only whale that has a blowhole near the front of the head, and the blowhole, can't really tell here, but it's off to the left of center, very asymmetrical. Oh, Miriam is posing near the teeth, and this is a good shot showing you the sockets in which those teeth fit. Sockets in the gum. And Annie is taking out a tooth for study. What can we learn from a tooth? That's the tooth. And I cut it and polished it and etched it with formic acid and stained it with ink because I wanted to see if lines could be revealed, because we think each line corresponds with a year of growth. And this was super cool. I took the tooth up to the Smithsonian. They're the ones who helped me do this. And we were able to count lines and estimate that this young male sperm whale was 15 years old when it came ashore at Cape Lookout and died. Similar to rings in a tree, each little line, and actually they're little groups of lines, we think represent a year of growth. And giving its length and its sex, that makes sense. 15 years old seemed reasonable. And this is the whale and the necropsy team assembled. The necropsy is an autopsy on a non-human. A couple of bloody slides coming up, but literally they're looking at all tissue groups, all organs, trying to learn about the life and the death of this whale. And getting very deep into it. A rib is being pulled out, the intestines are shown. Bruce is cutting off one of the flippers. I think it's the left flipper. John is holding a rib out of the way so that Paul can get to the heart, because he's a veterinarian and was very interested in the heart of a fresh dead sperm whale. And that's the heart. Come to a presentation Valentine's Day and I'll tell you all about that heart. But it's generally displayed under the skeleton from which it came at the Maritime Museum. And here I found something I'd always been looking for and I never saw before. This is spermaceti flowing from the head of the sperm whale. And it's a ginger ale colored liquid and a warm, fresh dead whale, and there it is flowing. And as soon as it hit the cold January air, it turned to white and waxy and got hard. I called for volunteers to get buckets because I really wanted to save some. And of course I did save some, and that's what I'm going to invite you to check out after the presentation. And it was used for lighting and lubrication and many things. Yeah, it was the main target for whaling. At the New Bedford Whaling Museum, I photographed these just to highlight some of the products that some of you may have seen or used before. Brake fluid in everything, transmission fluid in Rolls Royces, pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, photography, lots of uses for the oil from a sperm whale head. Okay. I mentioned sound, and I want to play for you a sound clip of sperm whales. Whalers would call them carpenter fish because when they were in the vicinity of sperm whales, they would hear that, and they thought it reminded them of hitting a nail with a hammer. So if you're expecting melodic, repeating humpback whale songs, you're going to be very disappointed. This is a short clip, and the acousticians on the boat with me, this is off North Carolina, told me they think this was 3 sperm whales. We don't know what they're saying, but we think it's really important. Yes, so kind of. This guy in California did an MRI of a sperm whale head, and he thinks they squish air back and forth, and the sound resonates through these lenses of oily tissue somehow. And much like a magnifying glass focuses and amplifies light, the oily tissues in the head of the sperm whale, the organ is called the melon, M-E-L-O-N, focuses and amplifies sound. So the sound is produced near the blowhole, somehow travels back to the skull, and that big parabola of the skull reflects the sound through the melon and all the oil. It's also called a spermaceti organ. If that doesn't make perfect sense for you, then you probably understand, because it's very confusing to me. um, but the combination of things. And the truth is, we really don't know much about it. As much as we know about them, anatomy and uses, they're deep animals, and it's never been, them in the wild. There hasn't been any good visuals of them deep. But we're learning a lot using hydrophones. There's future in that for students who want to get into marine biology, ocean acoustics. Stomach contents, a lot of parasitic worms, which is predictable, didn't signify a cause of death or anything, and lots of squid beaks. Lots of squid beaks. This whale had eaten recently. Well, how recently? I really can't say. I don't know if this represents the last meal or the last month or how long those squid beaks stay in the stomach. But this was the stomach contents. And I gave this presentation early on at the Maritime Museum, and a group from UNPC Wilmington raised their hand. Someone said, "Can we analyze that for you?" And I said, "What does that mean?" And they said, "Well, we want to figure out how many squid and what species." And I said, "Wow, that'd be cool." So I gave it to them, expecting no results. And 6 months later, they said, "Keith, we're ready to return your squid beaks." And that's Michelle and Ryan who did the work, and they made a reference collection of the squid beaks found in the stomach of that one fresh dead whale. And the most common squid was, I think that's called an umbrella squid. About 600 of those represented in the beaks. 19 different species of squid and one species of octopus was represented in the stomach contents. That was an oh wow. Equally cool, 2 of the species of squid documented in the stomach of this whale had never been documented in the North Atlantic Ocean, just in Hawaii. Huh? I don't think this whale went to Hawaii, but it could have. Or maybe Hawaii is just where squid scientists like to do their work. I don't know, but anyway. So that was a oh wow. Hyoid bones out of the still warm, fresh, dead whale. These are the bones in your throat. The highest bones, really critical for speech and swallowing. That's actually 5 bones, but you can't quite tell. Lunchtime. And at some point, one of the veterinarians said, "Keith, if you're going to build a skeleton out of this whale, can I borrow a flipper?" And I said, "I'm not building a skeleton out of this whale. We're just doing a necropsy. And who are you?" And he was Paul Nader. He's a veterinarian, and he's built about 11 whale skeletons, and he was very experienced. And he said, "You are crazy not to build a skeleton out of this. This is North Carolina wildlife. This is an endangered species. This is a terrific necropsy. You have everything. Why not?" So he talked me into it. So we didn't have equipment to drag it or bury it on right there. So we cut it up, put up signs encouraging people to not mess with it, cut the head off the body, borrowed a backhoe from the Park Service, and dragged most of the body up to the dune, and then dragged the head up to the dune. I know I'm going through this quickly. Dug a hole and buried the whale for most of 4 years to get the flesh off, to draw the grease out. We went back into the grave every year, but this was the day that we determined, okay, let's exhume it. And I guess it's getting stinky because Jim put his mask on. And we found the bones, and that was that day's collection of bones. A flipper, a scapula, one of the rack of ribs, and we had to call it a day after we got this. Went back and got the rest later. The fresh hyoid bones that I showed you earlier, this is what they looked like after 4 years in the grave. So they worked, they were cleaned up pretty well. Still a little stinky. Some of the vertebrae. And then a year later, we went back for the skull. And this is lifting the skull and upper jaws off the lower jaws there. This is a look at the palate. Still a fair amount of tissue associated with it. Nothing we couldn't handle. tip of the snout, brain back here. And the skull was pretty badly damaged, so badly that I just felt like giving up. But this woman, Elizabeth, loves jigsaw puzzle, and she said, no, Keith, we're going to save every piece in buckets, take it back to Beaufort, and we're going to find homes for them. And she and her team did. And you're looking at the top of the skull now. Oh my gosh, everything went wrong that day. The four-wheel drive donated Mitsubishi lost its four-wheel drive. The trailer that we put the skull on broke, so we had to go to Harker's Island and get another trailer. A full gale blew up, and there was whitecaps in Cape Lookout Bight, so I called the Park Service. I need help. They brought a big boat with a crane, and we could lift the skull on the trailer onto their boat with a crane. Brought the skull back to Beaufort, dug a pond, got some pond liner, filled the pond with oil, with water, went to the stables on Laurel Road, got about 15 gallons of fresh horse manure, threw it in the pond, and then put the skull in the pond. And that process is called maceration. And the anaerobic bacteria literally eat the flesh off the skull. And that's what we needed. And it worked pretty well. And there it is, just before we added the manure. And of course, we added water that covered the skull. Whew. Be glad these slides are not odoriferous. Adrian, a professor, and Angela, a student, wanted to be helpful. And I had been advised not to use real teeth in the final display because people would steal them and the teeth are valuable for study. So they're making molds of every individual tooth, all 42 of them. Those are silicone molds. And into each mold, they're pouring casting resin to make replicas. And after 3 minutes, the resin cures, and there is a replica of one of the tooth. Very exciting. And so that was Ashley's final project for her college class, is to make replicas and display the teeth, the fake teeth of the sperm whale. And these are the teeth that are in the final display. Woo. While the skull was in the pond, we took all the rest of the bones, weighed them for some geeky reason, and just made sure we had them all. Well, the weight was interesting. We learned that every right rib weighed a little more than the corresponding left rib. That every bone in the right flipper was a little heavier than the bone in the left flipper. Huh? What's up with that? I have no idea. But now we're starting to weigh everything because the asymmetry is probably important. And then that veterinarian, Paul Nader, who asked if he could borrow a flipper, which I gave him, took the flipper and x-rayed it. Because he had built several whales, and he said, we've never gotten the flipper right, but now I can x-ray it for you, and you can get it right. So this is an x-ray of that flipper. And it's an oh wow to a lot of people when they see the same bones in our arm, humerus, radius and ulna, carpals, phalanges arranged into 5 digits in the flipper of a sperm whale. And that is the arm of a human for comparison. And that enabled the McCutcheons to build the flippers literally by putting them on plexiglass on top of the x-ray so that we know we could get them right. There might not be many people on Earth who care, but we did. And then John Russell, a chemist by trade and a volunteer, made molds of every bone of that flipper because he thought it was so cool that people need to be able to handle this, and he made replicas. And that's an example of one of the replicas he made of the ulna, the left flipper, and ultimately he created this display. I cannot tell the difference between that and a real bone. He did a fabulous job, and educators can take this around, or people come to the museum and handle it. And he made another set so people can actually build a flipper. Yes.
What's the material of the replica?
Thanks. The question was, what was the material in the replica? Alumilite casting resin. And we use Platsil 2-part silicone to make the molds. And the casting resin comes in tan. So very convenient. But he ultimately painted them to make them look more like bone. Any other questions, comments, or anything to add? Okay? All right. And this project had some momentum, but the museum or anyone I knew did not have a place to do the work, to build the whale. So very briefly, I'm going to introduce you to a community barn raising. Literally, all volunteers, led by a volunteer contractor, built Bonehenge. Day 1, day 2, day 3, custom made to build a sperm whale skeleton. Day 4, installing the windows. Day 5, the roofers, my roofing divas, putting the coat of paint on, pouring the concrete floor. Wow, a real community barn raising. And hanging the barn door so that we can get the whale out when we finally build it. So this is where we spent 3 years repairing bones, sealing them, putting it together. All the bones were treated in a trichloroethylene vapor degreaser at the NC State Veterinary College's vet school to draw all the grease out, because whale bones are very greasy and the Maritime Museum is very small. And if I put a stinky, dripping sperm whale in the Maritime Museum, no one would be happy. So we spent about $9,000 to do this, and it worked. After the degreasing, we treated the bones in hydrogen peroxide, and that's what Jim is stirring now. Household strength, kills bacteria, dissolves some of the remaining bits of flesh, lightens the color a bit. Carpenter built a rack to help us stay organized, get the bones to dry. All the bones are coated with a product called Jade 403. It's bookbinding glue. Librarians love it. Never heard of anyone doing this before, but we did a little experiment, and this seemed to be a reasonable choice. We diluted it, and the first coat got sucked into the bone, and the second coat left a little bit of a coating on it to keep the bones from getting chalky over time and to add a tiny bit of strength where it was needed, because a lot of whale bones are very porous. So Brooks and Nelson are applying the bookbinding glue. Josh is drilling from one vertebra to the next so that they're all pinned together so that they don't come out of alignment. David, a shop teacher from a high school, was helping, and he's making a very precision cut where the first vertebra attaches to the skull. That's the spot right there. These are the hyoid bones that you saw first bloody and then out of the grave. This is a speech therapist. She called me up from the hospital and said, "Do whales have hyoids?" I said, "Yeah, why?" She said, "I want to see them. Can I work on them? I'm a speech therapist. Hyoids are so important to me." And so she came in most nights for about 2 weeks to work on them. Hired a local welder, Dennis, who did some custom welding to support the skeleton. Mary is applying bookbinding glue to the bottom of the skull. Karen is painting the replica teeth to look like the real ones. She's putting the finishing touches on one of the flippers. We had a little parade of the whale skeleton downtown Beaufort, ended up at the Maritime Museum. We are unloading at the museum. Dennis, Carl, and Josh are taking the lower jaws with the fake teeth that were painted into the museum. We weighed every component prior to installing it. Josh is putting eyes on the end of the support cables. You can't see this in the display, but these are custom little hangers that are between several places in the spinal column. inspecting the rigging. And that's the final result. That's on display at the Maritime Museum, which unfortunately is closed for now, but will be opened again, and you'll be able to see the whale skeleton and its heart beneath it. But there it is at the Maritime Museum. Early in the project, I was told to come up with a budget. Okay, and this is the budget I came up with and to do the work. And the bottom line, it was about $50,000 it was going to cost to do this project, and that didn't count the building. That was just materials, hiring the welder, so on. Stainless steel, hardware, adhesives, things like that. And then a volunteer said, Keith, how many bones are in that whale? I said, I have no idea. Why? He said, well, because we're going to fund this thing by selling bones. I said, no, you're not. It's an endangered species. No one can have this bone without a permit. He goes, no, you don't understand. People are going to sponsor bones and they'll have their name associated with it. And I said, so they're going to pay money and get nothing. And he said, yes. And I said, it'll never work. And it worked. So I counted all the bones and teeth, came up with how many of each type of bone, what the value of each bone and tooth would be to achieve the $50,000 estimate. And he called me up one night and said, Keith, I'm about to launch the fundraiser. Have you thought of a name for this project? And this is 11:30 at night. And I'd fallen asleep with a National Geographic on my chest, and I looked at the cover and it said Stonehenge. It was a National Geographic issue about Stonehenge, and just as a total joke, I said, what about Bonehenge? And we laughed, and he said, no, seriously, and we couldn't come up with anything better, so we called the project Bonehenge, and we called the building Bonehenge. And the fundraiser worked, and just a shout out to all the volunteers who had contributed something to this project, and all the organizations that they represented, and then just a little summary of the budget there, but we came in under budget. Who hears about that? And I've seen it on Facebook, so it must be true. If you have a Protect Wild Dolphins license plate on your car, you will look younger and sexier, your car will go faster and last longer, and you will be supporting the work I just presented to you. This is the only money we can count on every year to help support this. We get a check of about 10 to 14,000 a year from the Division of Motor Vehicles for the Protect Wild Dolphins license plate. Oh, doesn't that look good? And then just briefly, I'm going to introduce you to the Bonehenge Whale Center, which was born out of this project I just introduced you to. All these volunteers were feeling so good and frisky, and they had so much momentum. They said, let's build a real building for a permanent home for this work and this geek, Keith. And again, I was sure it wouldn't work. But they bought a little piece of land near museum's property at Gallant Channel. That's the top arrow. And they built this, volunteers. It's a 2-story building near the new high-rise. This is Gallant Channel. This is it from the street. There's a sign in front. This is not a museum, it's a shop. And they put me in charge, which I'm honored to do. And people who contact me via text or phone or email, I try to get them in there for a visit if I can. And this is what it looks like inside. Several skeletons in various stages of preparation. And much of what we do are for other venues. But a lot of them stay on display inside Bonehenge. Whew. You survived. Did I stay in? Oh, I did okay. Yes. Always. The question is, I'm not working on anything new. A 37-foot humpback whale who was known before she died from a ship strike. Her name is Pitfall, and I haven't posted anything about it yet. We really just started to dig into this, and so that's a big project that's dominating the main work floor. And I just have to mention a right whale we are working on as well. 2.5 years ago, a neonate newborn right whale, swam into Beaufort, turned around, swam into the port at Morehead City, got caught under the dock at the port, and died. And no sign of an adult. It died. Someone told me to put a gloved hand on the carcass and grab some skin, which I did. He said, okay, now invert your glove, which I did. He said, that's genetics gold. We might be able to figure out who the mom is. Oh, wow. Okay. Put that aside. Dead whale, we necropsied it here at Fort Macon. We buried it here for 2 years, here at Fort Macon, and we would like to build a skeleton of that for this education center. And so we're working on that as well. And then 2 years later, the results from the genetics came back. And we found out that the mom of that dead baby whale is named Granite. She is, as last year, she was 28 years old. This was her firstborn. That's very late in life to have a firstborn for a right whale. And she was sighted off of Georgia last year without a baby. But there's an aerial survey team who studies right whales, and they give us reports of who they see and who has a baby. So we'll be looking very carefully to see if Granite is doing okay and perhaps would have a second birth. Oh, that's a lot. You asked. Lots of projects going on. Other questions or comments? Yes.
Thank you so much. This was an incredible story. Like, forget the science for a minute.
Forget what?
The science.
Oh, forget the science, yeah.
Story, how many people were involved and volunteered? It's just astounding. Here's my question. Did nothing get disturbed when you were buried? You buried her for 4 years. No one ever disturbed the bones, or
no. It was so the question was, did anyone disturb the bones during those 4 years? And no, it was not. It was a poorly marked grave, well documented but poorly marked, and I didn't want to draw people to it. The woman's first comment was the community, and I just wanted to say I learned a lot during this process, but nothing more important than volunteerism and generosity and community. I learned so much about what is possible. So thanks. Yeah, no, it appeared that no one messed with any of the bones. Yes. Yeah. So we put hardware cloth on top of the grave, or chicken wire or something, to keep the. Now the question was, does wildlife mess with the bones? And in this case, it didn't. I have lost a bone to some kind of carnivore, so we're very careful when we bury things and wrap the bones in hardware cloth, cover the grave with chicken wire or fencing to keep the coyotes and raccoons and foxes out. So I hope that never happens again. Yeah.
So it's like a jigsaw puzzle, right? That you have to disassemble and reassemble.
Yes.
Like when you lay it all out, you mark, okay, put it together, you lock it, when she's done, let's get laid out.
Yeah, very carefully. We do mark the bones, literally write on them or put labeled tape on them to keep them in order. Talented veterinarians don't need to do that, but I'm not a talented veterinarian, so I really need to do that. Further, I go on what's it called, Oriental Trading Company, because they have mesh beach bags of different colors, and I put all the right bones in an orange beach bag, mesh nylon, because orange has an R in it and it doesn't have an L in it, and all the left bones in a blue one. You see where I'm going? And all the middle bones in a purple one, because purple has R in it. Anyway, so color coding, labeling, stupid number of photos, and really actually turns out every photo becomes important when we reassemble them. Thanks for asking. Yeah. How we doing? Other questions or comments or anything to add? I want to just bring your attention to spermaceti from the whale. This is from the head. Squid beaks from the stomach. If you've never handled baleen, this is your opportunity. It's not from a sperm whale, because a sperm whale is a toothed whale, but this is baleen from a humpback whale. You're welcome to handle. And this is a tooth from an adult male sperm whale that you're welcome to handle. And then I have a vertebra from a sperm whale. So just a few hands-on things if you're interested. And thanks for coming. I appreciate your interest. Yeah, cool. All right. Yeah. Maybe turn on some lights.
I'll turn that.
Oh, thanks.
We had a close encounter with these guys. I did last year.
Where?
I came looking
Okay.
by our boat. It's like I put down my fishing, my fly rod, start taking